Welcome to Crisis and Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time. Today, we're going to dig into a system that most of us don't really think about until it's under stress, the structural erosion of democracy. And this is so important because, the biggest changes aren't always loud and dramatic. A lot of the time, they're perfectly legal, they happen one small step at a time, and they just slowly become the new normal in our lives. So our guide for this breakdown is Naomi Wolf's 2007 book, The End of America. Now, it is really, really important to see this book for what it is. This isn't a political soapbox, and it's not trying to be a crystal ball. Think of it more like a framework. It's a way to apply systems thinking to look at the historical patterns, the actual mechanics of how democracies can start to unwind. The book kicks off with this quote, and it really gets to the heart of the matter. We're not talking about a sudden lights-out collapse. The focus here is on that twilight period, that slow, almost invisible shift where everything on the surface looks the same, but underneath, its purpose, its function, is starting to change. To really get how a system might break, the book argues that you first have to understand how its designers thought it was supposed to work. And for the American founders, democracy was absolutely not a sure thing. It's easy for us to think of democracy as this tough, resilient thing, right? Kind of like the default setting for a modern country. But the founders, coming right out from under European monarchies, they saw things completely differently. For them, history showed that tyranny, concentrated, unchecked power, was the norm. That was the default. Democracy, that was this fragile, high-maintenance, totally new experiment that needed every single citizen to be constantly vigilant just to keep it from falling apart. Okay, so if democracy is really that fragile, how exactly does it start to weaken? Well, the book's core argument is that this process isn't chaotic or random. It actually follows a surprisingly recognizable pattern, almost like a historical playbook that gets used over and over again. And here's the central insight. The shift away from a free and open society almost never starts with tanks in the streets. It starts quietly. It happens through a whole series of small, legal, and incremental steps. The institutions of democracy, the courts, the laws, the legislatures, they don't just disappear. Instead, they get repurposed. They're used to serve a totally different goal, all while keeping up the appearance of business as usual. Now, to describe this process, the book uses a very specific technical term, the fascist shift. It's important to understand this isn't meant as a political label. It's a mechanical description. It describes a process where the tools of a democracy, like passing new laws, are used step by step to weaken that very same system from the inside out. So how in the world does a change like that become normalized? How do people just adapt? The book actually walks us through the narrative of how that gradual erosion of freedom can happen. It all tends to start with a threat, a really scary one, both outside the country and inside it. The argument is that when people are genuinely afraid, they become much more willing to trade some of their liberty for a promise of safety. That climate of fear basically opens the door and provides the justification for all the changes that are about to come. Next up, the legal system itself gets used to change the rules of the game. New laws get passed, maybe expanding surveillance or putting new restrictions on the press, and they go through all the normal official channels. This makes the changes feel totally legitimate, maybe even essential. And as these new rules become the new normal, well, people adapt. We start to self-censor, maybe avoiding certain topics because it feels pointless or even risky. It's not that dissent is officially outlawed, it just gets quietly squeezed out. The book lays this all out as a series of steps, and the main metaphor it uses to help us picture this is a staircase. Think about it. Each individual step down, a new security law here, a new surveillance program there, it feels small. It feels manageable. Maybe even justifiable on its own. It's just one little step, right? But you take enough of those small steps, and pretty soon you look up and realize you're in a completely different place from where you started. And all of this brings us right back around to the book's conclusion, and to those original fears the founders had about their fragile new experiment. This quote from John Adams really drives the point home. The book uses it to argue that democratic systems don't have some kind of magical reset button. Once the core checks and balances are taken apart, you can't just assume the pendulum of politics will naturally swing back. At the end of the day, the real value of a framework like this isn't about predicting what's going to happen. It's about giving us a lens to better understand what is happening. It suggests that democracy isn't some destination we've arrived at. It's a process. It's a dynamic system that requires constant, active participation from all of us just to keep it running the way it was designed to. Which really just leaves us with a final question to think about. This isn't about being an alarmist. It's about being aware. How can we, as citizens, get better at monitoring the health of the very systems that are supposed to protect our freedoms? For the full, long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.